Hello Popcorn Junkies, and welcome to this review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. Of course, this is the fourth installment in the whole 28 Days Later film series, launched by Danny Boyle. Back then, the writer Alex Garland, who himself has gone on to direct many films, such as the incredibly pertinent and prescient Civil War, which I think I'm going to go back and watch through the lens of everything that's going on now. But this is 28 years later, The Bone Temple. This is the sort of follow-up, basically, to last year's 28 Years Later, which was the Danny Boyle relaunch, if you like, of the franchise. There was a lot to like about 28 Years Later, but I think fundamentally the reason it fell down was a number of reasons. We found Jodie Comer's character, not Jodie Comer, we love Jodie Comer, but we found her character of the mother somewhat irritating, diluting the drama. We liked the bits in the film that were like the bits in the trailer, which included the Rudyard Kipling kind of poem and the chant, and we liked the kind of tug towards a sort of paganistic, ritualistic sense of Britain and the UK and the British Isles, and it being the kind of focal point, the once bucolic focal point, if you like, of a zombie apocalypse. So there was a lot to like, but it kind of fell apart, I felt, 28 years later, ending, of course, in the most bizarre setup with Jack O'Connell as a sort of tribal gang leader a la Jimmy Savile Styley. Very strange, very odd. Also featured Ralph Fiennes in there as the doctor, the NHS doctor with the Bone Temple. So this is the follow-up. And what's interesting to note is that whilst 28 Years Later for me missed its target in so many different ways, I felt when I reviewed the film and saw the film that it missed many of its targets, much in the same way that, unfortunately, I know I'm very much on my own with this, I feel a lot of Danny Boyle's directed films do miss their targets. I think Danny Boyle and advocates for Danny Boyle think he's a more adventurous and kind of innovative filmmaker than necessarily I think he is. That's not to say he wasn't innovative or creative in things like Train Spotting, absolutely. But I don't think he's quite the firebrand of creativity and rule breaking that perhaps he likes to think, though he's a lovely guy, and those who support him like to think. Now this follow-up, which has come rather nicely, because sometimes one has to wait years for these, this follow-up has come almost exactly a year later, and this is directed by a director called Nia DaCosta. And the reason I was very intrigued and excited about her directing this film was that she directed the... Was it a reboot? Was it a revisit? Was it a sequel? Officially, I know people get their knickers in a twist about these things, to Candyman, that brilliant film. And the Candyman revisit, sequel, reboot, whatever it was, I thought was absolutely excellent. She demonstrated a firm control over tension, over characterization, over scene setting. She's got a good sense of rhythm, I think, to the storytelling arc of an entire film. And so I'm going to say right at the front here, I thought this film, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which I went in to see with a bit of kind of hesitancy and a bit of a heavy heart, thinking, oh God, is this going to be like 28 Years Later, which was good-ish, but long and irritating and frustrating and fell short. There's no two ways about it. It just felt like it fell short of what it could have been. This film was a hugely pleasant surprise. And so of the two films, I much preferred this, The Bone Temple. And I'm going to tell you why. Mainly, I think the one thing that kind of is a major ingredient in this film that lifts this film head and shoulders above the previous film. I'm not commenting on the original films, I'm talking about these two new iterations. Is that this very much really focuses on Ralph Fiennes as the doctor. We dig into his kind of going mad, the dangers of isolation, him playing with tinctures and medication to see if he can get the alpha male zombie, whatever it is, Samson, to kind of remember his past. You know, there's a kind of neat, non-visually dramatic story there about connection, about loneliness, about expertise, about being a doctor with skills and trying to kind of find a pleasant solution to this kind of apocalypse and this virus that's gone around and killed everyone. And then on the other side, you've got Jack O'Connell playing the lunatic Jimmy, head of the crazy gang. Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal he plays, and he's the head of this gang of lots of youngsters, lost boys almost, Peter Pan-esque, with, you know, yellow wigs on and all the rest of it. And I think the reason this stands head and shoulders above the last film is, I have to say, both, yes, Ralph Fiennes is strong, though I have to say I think his performance is verging somewhat on the satirical. I mean, I think he goes for a slightly overperformed shtick, but I think it kind of works. I kind of like it, and I like the fact that we stick with him for longer. But really, this is Jack O'Connell's film, and Jack O'Connell gives this film such a deep, dark, deeply disturbing pulse, if you like. The pulse of this film is one that beats to very much the kind of twisted, internal, fractured, fucked up logic of Jack O'Connell. And I can't work out whether in a weird way, I spent most of this film trying to work out what was making Jack O'Connell tick. What would make him be loyal to one of his tribe and not others? What would make him care about someone else? Where does his vulnerability lie? What is his vision of how he's surviving and why he's surviving? He keeps referring to old Nick. He sort of makes out like he's got this almost kind of celestial connection to a kind of god, so he's very much a cult leader and all that. And I wonder whether the appeal of his character and all of these kind of issues that you're thinking about as a viewer speaks to the madness of Donald Trump in the White House. We're dealing with someone who's not entirely dissimilar to this absolute megalomaniac played by Jack O'Connell. We've got someone like him in the White House with equivalently odd buffooned hair, coiffured hair, and equally psychopathic, malignant and narcissistic. And so this is an interesting film about faith, about following, about tribal belonging, about the importance of creating faith, but also it's a kind of horror film too. And so this film was just doing a hell of a lot more. And in a weird way, it wasn't doing as much obvious action stuff as the previous film, 28 Years Later, which was we're going on a mission, we're going on to the mainland, we're leaving Lindisfarne, we've got to find someone, there's none of that finder stuff. This was a much more kind of existential exploration of survival from two very different perspectives. One, the NHS doctor coated in iodine, played by Ralph Fiennes, Dr. Ian Kelson, and the other, Jack O'Connell, with his group that includes obviously the boy Spike that comes from the previous film. And Spike's brilliant, actually, played by Alfie Williams. He's there in the group. He's the new kind of intake, isn't he? And he's trying to come to terms with the brutalism and the sadism and the strange kind of internal kind of games and violence that goes on between members of the gang in order to kind of prove their loyalty, if you like, to Jack O'Connell. The film starts with, I thought, and I immediately felt with the first scene, yay, we're in quite competent, capable hands here. The film started with a bone-crunchingly awful scene in the kind of, I think it was it in the kind of empty, within an empty, barren sort of swimming pool? And it started with a fight to the death, and one of the boys in his gang, in Sir Lloyd Jimmy Crystal's gang, or the Fingers gang, there's a fight to the death, Spike's initiation fight, if you like, and he, more accidentally than kind of intentionally, slips the knife into this one of the member of the gang's leg and hits the artery. He hits the artery, and meanwhile he bleeds out. And so there's a brutalism, a brutality. You see Jack O'Connell almost enjoy looking and watching the kind of the gang member as they bleed out to death. And so Spike, in a sense, though it's a fractured kind of belonging to the tribe, he's found his way in. He's passed the initiation. He hasn't died. He's in the group. But then meanwhile, so we've got the sense of the gang, we've got Jimmy Savile's gang, and now, I mean, let's think about that. What was, I mean, this is written by Alex Garland. What's the thinking behind, the Jimmy Savile gang? Because there are many references to things like, at one point, one of the gang members is invited by Jack O'Connell to do the Teletubbies dance. There's a very strong suggestion that CBBC, or children's television, has infiltrated and fed into the kind of the morals, the rules, the systems involved in belonging to Jack O'Connell's Fingers gang. It was an odd thing. And so you've got, and what I liked about these curious moments where, like, this gang member's asked her, show them the Teletubbies dance, and she does it. It felt quite sort of Blade Runner. You remember that Blade Runner moment where Daryl Hannah, as that kind of replicant, does the weird dance, and then it felt like there were sort of Lynchian undertones. This was dark and unsettling in not necessarily obvious narrative ways. You just felt a sense of, this is icky and weird. And that's in the humans, if you like. And then conversely, on the other side, you've got Dr. Ian Kelson, who's got this strange kind of symbiotic relationship with Alpha Mailman. Now, if anyone who remembers our review of the first film, Alpha Mailman, or Samson, as he's called by Ralph Fiennes because of his fabulous head of hair, He's got the biggest schlonger in TV history. I don't know if his schlonger is that size because of the virus or because of the, you know, the kind of the zombification of everyone, or whether it's just what he had before and now it's just flapping around everywhere. But it's one hell of a schlonger that you see all the way through this film. His kind of, I couldn't help but feel that there was even a sort of, you know, he was lonely, Ian Kelson, Ralph Fiennes' character. He was lonely. He's a doctor. He was using morphine and medication to kind of numb out Samson. So you've got scenes of sort of almost kind of junkies kind of getting high and trying to escape the kind of brutal realism and reality of what they were living through. A connection was formed, and I thought again it was weird. There was almost a slight pseudo kind of, not sexual relationship, but romantic relationship, a needy relationship, as Ralph Fiennes really tended to and attended to Samson's kind of physicality and his needs when he was high. And we had lots of lingering shots over Samson's face as his eyes, the cloud almost over his eyes, would begin to sort of fade, as you felt he was beginning to reach back and remember things prior to the arrival of this 24-hour viral thing that changed humanity forever. And so there was a neat, you know, again, and obviously in cynical business terms, this is pointing towards the future. Is this a cure? Is there the kind of suggestion that there's something that can reverse this virus, reverse the zombification of people? But I thought the actor who played Samson, I'll just give him a shout out, Chi Lewis-Parry, was really good at playing this mute, this alpha male mute who slowly starts to kind of step back towards some kind of consciousness of what's going on. I found that quite magical. I found it quite mystical. I found it poignant. And so I thought that was a really nice, surprising detail to have, which wasn't one of hysteria, wasn't one of sped up zombie. Because I think the danger with all these films, all these zombie films, is that we lean on the same trope, which is in this. There are moments where, you know, rapid moving zombies come at you and try and eat you and you have to shoot them and all the rest of it. But I thought this was a film that wasn't afraid to step towards the more cerebral, the more kind of spiritual even, which very much becomes the case as Sir Jimmy, basically Sir Jimmy's entourage or gang starts to get severely depleted. You know, people start to get killed. At one point, they kind of uninvited take over the cottage and they skin and kill some of the other members of the house. You know, they're brutal, they're monstrous, and there's a sort of Lord of the Flies thing in there. There's a sort of Peter Pan thing in there. And yet all the while you've got Jack O'Connell kind of controlling these kids, his lost boys, if you like, and girls, by suggesting there's old Nick, and old Nick is sort of channeling messages to him, and he sort of plays the whole almost evangelical. And let's not forget, Jack O'Connell's father in the previous film, it was a monstrous and corrupt vicar priest character. So religiosity and faith sprinkles through, even to Jack O'Connell in this twisted, dark, nasty way. And I think really for me the really kind of crunch moment in the film is where Jack O'Connell and Ralph Fiennes' characters come together. So Jack O'Connell sees this bone temple, you know, goes ahead of his lost boys because he wants to see if this is the devil. You can see there's uncertainty in Jack O'Connell. Jack O'Connell's like, maybe there is someone called Old Nick and all the rest of it. So he goes off to meet Ralph Fiennes, and I thought there was a really interesting exchange between the two of them, calm exchange between the two of them. Again, a little bit like Trump meeting with Putin. Not Starmer, but, you know, it's like two nutters, one going mad, the doctor, through loneliness and kind of just weirdness. I mean, you've got to be weird to build this kind of ossuary. It's called an ossuary, isn't it? Where you sort of put bones together in a temple. But they have this exchange where Jack O'Connell talks about his past. He talks about his memories of his father being a corrupt priest and vicar. And then clearly he enters into a Faustian pact with Ralph Fiennes that if Ralph Fiennes pretends to be the devil or Old Nick for Jack, so that Jack can kind of secure his kind of control and superiority and authority over his gang, then all will be good, and Jack, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So that's all well and good. Other details that I thought were really lovely were real references again back to a cultural past by Ralph Fiennes' character as he'd go into his kind of almost like a cave or hovel and he'd put on tunes. I think Duran Duran was something that he would dance to himself. And so I thought Ralph Fiennes did a really good job of a man who once cared. There's a very funny gag about the NHS saying, we won't charge you for this, it's free, it's on the NHS. I just thought this was quite a nifty, interesting, entertaining, very well acted piece of not obvious zombie horror film. This was a film less interested in the obvious zombie horror, but more interested in the horror of the humans, but also not in that way that The Walking Dead did, which is, okay, humans can be violent. I mean, Jack O'Connell carries this so brilliantly. There are so many moments and shots where we're just looking at Jack O'Connell, and he manages to play that entirely contradictory, irrational, unpredictable kind of malevolence, but at the same time also hedging his bets and not too sure as he starts to see members of his gang get eliminated or killed or die, or they start to kill each other, or when he kind of tries to tackle Ralph Fiennes, and then Ralph Fiennes has this incredibly lurid, very theatrical, very dramatic dance kind of, you know, almost fire and lights show at the end of the film to kind of prove his devilry and all this kind of stuff, and then it all twists around, and then by the end of the film, spoiler, 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 if you're going to go and watch this, what everyone's been waiting for in this entire franchise, I understand, is the potential return of who other than Cillian Murphy. And so we get, again, this film very much points towards a future possible continuation as we see the two remaining characters, I won't say which two are remaining, from this film. They're left as, you know, they're the sole survivors running across the field, and we cut to Cillian Murphy and his daughter learning, homeschooling basically, as they see them arrive. Now, the weird thing about this is I feel that whatever this is now pointing towards won't be as interesting as this. For me, I feel this might be the most interesting moment in this relaunch of the 28 Years Later franchise, precisely for all the reasons I've said, where it didn't go for any of the obvious stuff. Even our most monstrous, threatening, frightening character, Samson, though there's a great big smash 'em up where he's fighting and he's kind of being attacked by other zombies, I thought the interesting thing there was his transition from alpha male primate like zombie guy into a creature with memory. And there's an incredibly emotional moment where he looks at the moon and he says moon, actually just at the point that Ralph Fiennes was about to finish him off. I like the way the film dealt with the idea of drug addiction. I really bought into Ralph Fiennes' kind of dependency almost on the drugs, and then Samson's dependency on the drugs, and then him suddenly going, oh my God, he said moon, so that means I've hit upon something. Maybe antipsychosis drugs will help bring zombies back to life. And I thought there was a real kind of charm and poignancy in Samson's story arc. Weirdly, he doesn't say many words. And there was also poignancy and real violence in Jack O'Connell's ascendancy and fall from grace too. So I think there was really powerful two sort of story arcs talking to the human condition, looking at the worst end of humanity, disconnection or connection through violence and evil, and the other end, which was connection through memory and loss and isolation and loneliness. I thought Erin Kellyman was excellent. She was in series like Raised by Wolves. She was also in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I thought this was one of her best roles. I really liked her in this. She was great. She was one of the kind of gang, if you like, who kind of gets close to Spike and sort of functions almost like an older sister. I thought the rest of the group, the rest of the Fingers gang were excellent at being frightening, irrational, unpredictable. God only knows what they do next, and how did Jack O'Connell hold on to their loyalty so fiercely, and all the rest of it. There's some good gore in there. There's some great deaths in there. So all in all, I found this film infinitely more enjoyable, rewarding, thought-provoking even than the last film. And it, again, for me, unfortunately, seals my belief that I just don't think Danny Boyle's half as good a director as other people making films in his franchises, if I'm honest. So I would highly recommend this film. I thought it was great, not fun, but it was just a great rip-roaring story, adventure. And I would give this a massive 92 out of 100.